I was a Haas Scholar during my senior year as an undergraduate at UC Berkeley, which meant I got the opportunity to do year-long mentored and funded research. I explored the positive emotions in autistics, specifically the emotion of awe. It was kind of super awesome, pun intended, to research awe, and that too with the guidance of Professor Dacre Keltner, who has done the seminal research on awe. So what got me interested in this topic? During my interview with Professor Keltner for the Daily Californian, he had mentioned that the human capacity for awe is our defining feature. This really caught my attention, as I feel much of what I'm inspired to do is driven by awe. This slide from my undergraduate human happiness course explains what awe is. Awe is the feeling of being in the presence of something vast and mysterious that transcends your current frame of reference and requires that you seek integration and meaning. Benefits of awe include less stress, greater happiness, expanded sense of time, reduced activation of the cytokine system, which produces inflammation, and a greater sense of community. It turns out that you benefit from even small doses of awe. In a Keltner lab study, participants were asked to stare up at these tall grove eucalyptus trees on the UC Berkeley campus. Almost immediately after looking up at the trees, the participants displayed more pro-social behaviors, like becoming more helpful towards strangers. In another study, when the elderly took 15-minute awe-oriented walks, they reported more joy and smiles. So I thought, how can I understand and extend these benefits to a marginalized group, namely, autistics? And can awe be a useful tool in the autistic coping toolbox? The study had 100 autistics and 100 controls who were matched for age and education level. We made use of several established psychological scales, as well as short narratives. I will just jump right into the results. I like to think of research results as mini-stories which contribute to the larger story. So I'm going to tell you stories that my research unearthed. The first set of findings is around income and socioeconomic status. The graph shows subjective socioeconomic status, where participants were asked to place themselves on a societal social ladder. Almost a quarter autistics placed themselves at rung 3, while a quarter neurotypicals placed themselves in rung 7. It seems to hint that being disabled comes with a social cost. To give you a heads up on how the next set of results are presented, autistics are yellow, as that is my favorite color, and the neurotypicals are blue. For each trait or emotion, just look at how the yellow bar is positioned relative to the blue bar in the graph. Remember, lower is not a bad thing, it often just means different. In terms of personality traits, autistics self-report that they are more open to experience, and also they were more neurotic. Neuroticism is the tendency to experience negative emotions, such as anger, anxiety, or depression. We had looked at how autistics experience positive emotions. We found that autistics reported different trait-like tendencies to experience various positive emotions. Autistics scored higher for dispositional awe and dispositional compassion compared to neurotypicals. But autistics also reported less contentment and less love. Taken together, these results depart from an emotion deficit model of autism. While autistics reported less love and contentment, they reported more trait-like experiences of compassion and awe. It suggests a more outward, other-oriented focus in trait-like positive emotion for autistics. Only dispositional awe could be explained by differences in SES or personality traits, which follows other research findings, in that with increased income, feelings of awe are reduced. Next, let's look at all the stories from the awe experience. Given the previous findings, the awe experience itself was explored. One finding was around altered time perception, in that time seems to slow down when you experience awe. Autistics reported a higher altered time perception during an awe experience. A second is around the need for accommodation. In the context of awe, the need for accommodation refers to the cognitive shift when we try to get our head around an awe experience that we did not quite mentally grasp. It's like going to the Grand Canyon, you are in absolute awe, but it's too huge to even comprehend. Autistics reported a higher need for accommodation. A third finding was around the physiological sensations experienced during an awe experience. like you could have goosebumps, the chills or your eyes widen. Autistics reported lower physiological sensations during an awe experience. Taken together, the autistic experience of awe seems to involve greater shifts in time perception, to involve more accommodation or cognitive processing of the experience, and to involve fewer bodily sensations. This is a frequency graph where we identified different awe elicitors. In line with earlier studies, nature served as the most powerful elicitor for both groups. For autistic participants, visual design, which is impersonal by nature, served as a more common elicitor when compared with elicitors like other people, collective movement, life and death, all involving a social component. The preceding results suggest that other people were less relevant to the autistic experience of awe. We coded ratings for additional dimensions of awe as well as social appraisal themes. Autistics' narratives included a higher sense of the divine and a higher sense of the truth compared to those of neurotypicals. The autistic experience of awe was less guided by a sense of moral purpose. If you think about it, morality is a society-based ideal which also constantly keeps changing. In the social appraisal themes in awe, we found that discovery and self-reflection were less prominent for autistics. This again highlights the abstract, disorienting, away from the physical body nature of the awe experience for autistics. The awe experience can be both positive and negative, and there were additional insights on the way autistics viewed positive and negative awe. In terms of frequency, both groups were almost matched for positive and negative awe. What was interesting was group differences in the language used to describe positive awe. All the neurotypical responses framed their reaction to positive awe in glowing positive language, almost inspiration-like. It was more of the positive. In sharp contrast, a third of autistics thought of positive awe as absence of negative. Autistics used language indicating less of something, like less worry or less alone or escape, or that this was a situation where they were the ones not at fault for not providing a socially appropriate response. So it was an absence of the negative. Now let's look at how autistics viewed negative awe. Almost 20 autistics associated negative awe with the consequences of being put in a situation of not understanding. Why? Because navigating society demands you understand rules and environmental cues. An awe situation was often in the non-understandable realm. So when autistics are not able to quickly wrap their heads around a situation, it led to a feeling of loss of control, which in turn increased stress. It led to imagining negative outcomes, or maybe worrying that I'm missing something. So for some autistics, positive awe was less of the negative, while negative awe was not understanding. Another insight story is around the creative process. A number of autistics thought that awe was a motivator in the creative process. One of the participant comments was on something that I, as an autistic, have often reflected upon. Things that inspire awe leads to special interests in autistics, and the special interests in autistics often drives their creative process. There were mentions of synesthesia, alexithymia and sensory processing in the autistic narratives, though this had not been specifically asked for in the study. Synesthesia is when the stimulation of one sensory modality stimulates additional modalities like hearing music and also physically feeling music simultaneously. Alexithymia is the difficulty in identifying and describing emotions experienced by oneself. Sensory processing is the way our body receives and processes stimuli. Autistics reported that the presence of sensory processing differences and synesthesia served to highly heighten, to the point of being overwhelming, or even dampen the emotional experience for a positive or negative effect of awe. Autistics who identified with alexithymia reported that they had no problems identifying the emotion of awe as it was such a strong, almost visceral emotion. Which makes me wonder if awe can be used to study alexithymia and interoception in autism. Interoception is the sense that helps you understand what's going on inside your body, like knowing when you are sick, hungry, tired, which are important for self-regulation. Self-regulation being an issue many autistics struggle with. Another insight was around mental health. There was a recurring theme of mental health in the narratives which touched on bullying, anxiety, trauma, sadness, self-doubt, self-criticism, misunderstanding, and burnout in navigating society. Autistics also pointed to the benefits of Awe experiences on mental health. For example, one respondent says that it reminded them of an attribute that helped their self-worth. Another pointed to the time-altering factor of Awe, slowing them down, and giving them time to process emotions, instead of being overwhelmed. There seems to be general consensus that Awe is helpful. And coming back to alexithymia, a suggestion was that an externally triggered experience of Awe could bring more awareness to the internal emotional experience. Since pride was used as a control emotion, findings from the pride narratives are briefly mentioned here. Look at the differences in the elicitors of pride, especially the ones with the red star. Many more autistics found pride in recognition of their accomplishments by others, compared to neurotypicals. Does that sound familiar? Much of our life is driven by a need for acceptance by society. Many more autistics also found pride in advocacy and helping others compared to neurotypicals. As a disabled person, I can relate to advocacy being a critical skill in our life. Putting it all together, it turns out that far from being emotionally deficient, this study reveals a rich and deep emotional life of autistics. They feel more distress and compassion for others. They feel more awe, especially on Awe tied to the body. There are similar patterns in many stigmatized, marginalized groups. From the autistic narratives we got additional insights into positive and negative Awe, the creative process, interplays of sensory processing, mental health, and Awe as a coping tool. I want to end by urging everyone to incorporate small doses of Awe in their everyday life. You don't have to go on an expensive vacation to experience Awe. You can experience Awe all around you. Autism therapy tends to be quite expensive. Awe is both inexpensive and accessible. Let's make Awe a tool in our coping toolbox. A few acknowledgements. Bob and Colleen Haas, for funding the Haas Scholars Research. Professor Keltner, I continue to be in awe of your mentorship. Counselor Leah Carroll, guidance and glue of the program. And my cohort, for the amazing shared research journey. This research was also my undergraduate senior honors thesis. I got nice encouraging faculty comments on my thesis. I am working with my mentor to get this research on Awe, and my research on empathy to publication.